Happy Friday. Welcome to Mile High Sports today. Happy Football Friday. All sorts of football coming for you today. High school, collegiate, pros, the works. We got all of it. If it happens in Colorado and it's football, we're talking about it. I'm Sean Drotar. That's Nate Lundy. Danny Bailey is in the booth. We'll have an opportunity to talk to Chase Howell, host of the SCO Show today, about the Buffs and Baylor. We'll have a chance to talk to Dan Mohrmann, as we do on Fridays, breaking down the biggest games in preps sports with coloradopreps.com. And then we'll have a chance to talk with our friend Troy Renck as well from the Denver Post, host of the Broncos podcast with Troy Renck. But Nate, let's just start it off here. The Broncos are trying to avoid an 0-3 start against a team they don't play often. They've only played against the Buccaneers 10 times in the regular season in their entire history. But generally, September games in Florida, you get the early morning, you get the heat, you get the humidity. And in the Broncos case, look, they're not the better team.
Yeah, absolutely not. I've said all week, and I'm sticking with it, that I think the Broncos lose this game by double figures. I think they lose to the Jets by double figures, and I think they come back 0-4 to take on Antonio Pierce and the Raiders. The only way that I can see something like that changing, although I don't think that it changes the win-loss outcome, but that could make it a closer game, is something that we visited yesterday with our friend TJ Reeves from the Buccaneers Radio Network, who talked about the various injuries that Tampa is dealing with right now, in particular on their defensive line. Somebody like Vita Vea, who did not practice on Wednesday, did not practice yesterday either. We'll wait to see what the report comes out today in terms of his status as well as others. But, my guess is that we're going to see questionable as his official status by the time they release that report later today. I think those are things that you need to pay attention to. But, as I mentioned yesterday in our conversation with TJ, I think one of the things you have to keep in mind as a Broncos fan is that, you might be dealing with some injuries on that back end and dealing with things in the secondary or in the defensive line for Tampa. But that's offset by the injuries that the Broncos are dealing with on their offensive line. So I think those two things cancel themselves out for a Broncos offensive line that was already a bit of a question mark in terms of whether it would be or wouldn't be a strength for this team. Yes, they're spending a lot of money. We all know that. But I haven't seen that translate into really solid play yet out of that offensive line through the first two games.
No, I think that's fair. And yeah, you talk about Vita Vea. Obviously, that's going to be a major loss if he can't go. Antoine Winfield, another guy struggling with foot injury, another well-established player, would be a loss. William Golston was limited, another guy on their defensive line. So there are some challenges there for Tampa Bay. For the Broncos, the only guys that did not practice yesterday, Baron Browning with the foot injury, JL Skinner, the third safety in that safety rotation, did not practice with an ankle injury. John Franklin Myers with concussion was able to practice in a limited fashion, as was Brandon Jones, the starting safety. So that's not great news for the Broncos, but it could be worse. Of course, Mike McGlinchey placed on the injured list. He's not playing for at least the next 4 games. Alex Palchevsky will go ahead and start for him at the right tackle side. Matt Parrott, another option, but Parrott has only been a left tackle and comes in as the heavy in that tight end spot in that kind of lineup. So yeah, there are some injury concerns for both of these teams. For the Broncos, I would argue when you're the team that isn't as good, those are worse for you than they are for the opponent regardless. But a lot of this, as you've talked about, Nate, this is all about Bo Nix. The numbers for Bo Nix on the season, they're a little gory, as you could imagine right now. 59.7% completion, 192 yards per game, no touchdowns, 4 interceptions, 4 sacks. It's ugly, but that's not necessarily the be-all, end-all, because as we've talked about this season with the Broncos, it is about week-to-week improvement. We saw a little bit of it. The speed of the game didn't seem to be so much. He wasn't missing behind guys as much, but the interception in the end zone was an abysmal read, and nobody should make that read. And Nix's, of course, very terse response to that indicates that even he understands that's a read in high school he wouldn't have made. So even though the throws were better on time and the speed is catching up, there's also some parts of the speed of the game that he still needs to work on. He's still throwing off balance, off the back foot, making reads like he did at the interception in the end zone. Those are costly. Bo Nix knows better, but again, it's an adjustment to game speed.
Yeah, it really, truly is. And that's why I keep coming back to this idea and this thought that we've shared here, even going back to training camp, which is I'm okay with very small incremental improvement from Bo as long as what we're seeing is those little baby steps that are not combined with giant steps backwards. We have seen every quarterback in the NFL do a stupid interception like the one that Bo threw against the Steelers. Everyone has done that at some point in time. So I'm not just going to chalk that up to, oh, well, he's a failure because he made a bad read. Every quarterback in the league has made stupid reads. And sometimes they do it in the playoffs. And it costs them an opportunity at a Lombardi trophy. So
that's the Peyton Manning and Tracy Porter.
Yeah, exactly. So I think, I want to make sure that we are critical of the play that took place and the turnover in the back of the end zone, but to also recognize that that is not specific to a rookie quarterback. That is not specific to Bo. That is not specific to the Broncos, or even, frankly, for that matter, to the Steelers defense. Those are things that just happen, and they happen from time to time within the NFL. So if he can make some simple improvements, and we've already identified multiple times this week on the things that he improved from week 1 to week 2. So I'm comfortable with that in that part of our conversation. I'm more than happy with where that is. Now, can I see a couple more?
Yeah. And some of the numbers, obviously, you worry about when you look at the NFL Next Gen stats, the negative 7.1% completion rate, which is basically they're going over every single pass and the coverage and everything and saying, look, the expected completion percentage on this is X. And then how did they really complete it? So Bo Nix is underwater at minus 7.1%. So basically he's hitting 7% fewer of the completions than you would expect given the throws. But if you think that is an awful number, and it's not good, it's near the bottom of the league. But again, the small sample size and understand, here's the guys that are behind him. The worst, he only had the part of one game, is Jordan Love. So we can maybe throw that out. Daniel Jones, minus 11.6. Well, Daniel Jones is not great. Bryce Young is at minus 9, the closest to Bo Nix. He's been since benched. But Nix at minus 7.1. Caleb Williams is at minus 9.1. No risk of being benched there. Anthony Richardson, minus 9.4. Trevor Lawrence, minus 10.7. So these are all quarterbacks that are expected to be better than Bo Nix, and they're underwater even worse. So it's important not to just get panicky about this. The Broncos don't have some of the talent, let's say, like the Bears. I could argue that Caleb Williams' numbers are worse, given the fact he has a better overall roster and better playmaking talent. So I don't think there's a lot to freak out about. You just want to see that incremental improvement from Nix and from the Broncos on a week-to-week scenario. But some of that also has to come from the aggressiveness downfield. Bo Nix's aggressiveness numbers when it comes to next-gen stats, meaning the tight windows is throwing it in, very high. That's great, I guess, if you're Patrick Mahomes, but unless you're that kind of player, it's probably dangerous and indicative of you throwing picks, which is what we've seen, throwing into double coverage, too tight windows. But that combination and the fact that they don't throw downfield is also the concern. 5 for 24, more than 10 yards downfield in the air. And until the Broncos actually mount some sort of threat, whether that's a combination of Nix, his receivers, his blockers, play calling, all of it, until they prove that they can threaten downfield with the passing game. Even if the Bucs don't have Vita Vea, Nate, it's not going to be very hard for them to be able to shut the Broncos down because they're still too predictable. And when you know that you're not threatened over the top, doesn't have to be some bomb 40 yards downfield, but when you can't even move the ball with consistency 10 to 15 yards down the field, you make it way too easy for the defense. And that's more than anything what the Broncos have been dealing with.
Well, and, keep in mind, Goff threw a touchdown to McCollum in the Lions game against the Bucs last week. And I think it was the first play of the game, actually, if I remember right. And had another near pick. So there's a secondary there that if you make a mistake will make you pay for it. And you're right. I think that regardless of whether Vea is playing or not, or some of the other defensive guys that we've talked about, the only way that you can cause some chaos from an offensive standpoint is to try to get down the field a little bit. Those are things that the Broncos have not done, as you said, 5 for 24. They're not taking a lot of shots down there, and I kind of understand it, to be honest with you. Like you can't just force it, right? If all of a sudden you're spreading out and you're trying to get down the field, you're going to leave him vulnerable to sacks. I mean, there are some things that we want so desperately to see as fans that we have to recognize the talent isn't on this team to pull it off. And so, yeah, do they need to try to get down the field a little bit more? Do they need to find a way to take advantage of a Josh Reynolds, for example? Do they want to try to sideline route things with Devon Baylor? Do they want to do? Yes, of course they do. But they also have to make sure that Bo Nix has enough time to make that happen. And I think that Sean Payton can switch up his play calls. He can get him outside of the pocket. He can buy him some time for those receivers to get downfield. But Bo also has to make sure that between the ears, he's making smart decisions.
Yeah, and the Broncos could help him out with the running game as well. Javonte Williams and Jaleel McLaughlin on the season have been underwhelming. In the loss to the Steelers, 14 carries for 23 yards. You don't have to know a lot about math to realize that's fewer than 2 yards a carry, and that's not going to get it done. It's why the Broncos in their first two games have had 14 3-and-out drives. A lot of these with long third down and distance situations. That's not going to make things easy for Nix either. Again, think of the combination. Just pretend you're not even a defensive coordinator at the NFL level. Pretend you're playing Madden back on your Xbox, right? When you see that one team has 3rd and 8, and you also know that their quarterback can't complete a pass seemingly more than 10 yards down the field, are you going to call a bunch of deep coverage situations? No, you're going to go after the quarterback because he's prone to make mistakes. So that's what the Broncos have been doing. They have to be better on first down and second down. And I get it. The challenges with the offensive line are very real. But you ask any offensive lineman, and Nate, you and I have had the opportunity to work with more than a few of them in this line of business who will tell you that.
Yeah.
They like run blocking more than pass blocking. You know why? Think about it. When you hear hut, when you're pass blocking, what's your first step? Backwards, right? You're moving backwards. You're trying to make sure that your momentum doesn't carry you into the quarterback. Run blocking, guess what you get to do? You get to go out and hit somebody. You get to move forward. You get to go ahead and be the aggressor. So the line has to be better, but every offensive line, and the Broncos in particular, even without McGlinchey, Powers has always graded as a better run blocker. Bowles has always graded as a better run blocker. These guys are better run blockers than pass blockers. They have to do a better job, and the running backs, whoever they may be, Nate. And I don't know at this point if it's going to be Williams and McLaughlin, or it's going to be Tyler Beatty, or even Blake Watson. I don't know necessarily, but the Broncos have to keep, in this case, they cannot just punt on the running game when it doesn't work early. It is an investment in the game, especially in a game where it's going to be hot and humid. You have to continue to do it and wear the Buccaneers down, and it's even more important to do so if they don't have Vea in the middle.
Yeah.
This is not a game you're going to win through the air. If the Broncos are going to win it at all, and I agree it's a long shot, they're going to do it because they outgain the Bucs on the ground, and by a lot.
Well, and keep in mind, Rachaad White with the injury against Detroit, and so his status is a little bit in question. They do have Bucky Irving, the back out of Oregon, that they have looked at as a change of pace type of guy, but that he has the ability to come in and be able to run. And regardless of whether it's White or it's Irving, from a defensive standpoint for the Broncos, in terms of getting Bo and the offense back out on the field, Alex Singleton's going to need to have a good game. You're going to need to make sure that these guys do not get too far into the second layer of the defense to avoid having the Bucs do any kind of quick hits on you, yardage that they don't deserve is what I like to call it.
Right.
There's one thing when a back is just, strong and powerful and runs you over or breaks a tackle or things like that. That is a good strength piece when it comes to an offense, right? But what you want to make sure is that they're not getting yards they don't deserve. Somebody missing a tackle, somebody being out of position. Those are the things that you want to be able to avoid. If you are getting ready for this game this weekend, I know it's an early one, right? It's at 11 o'clock. It's a little bit early, but you know what that means? Oh, that means some very good lunchtime deals for you. And that means you can manage to cater with our friends at Rolling Smoke Barbecue. If you want to jump in and make sure that everybody that shows up at your house to enjoy watching the game leaves happy and stuffed. And I'm talking with good barbecue. Those are our friends at Rolling Smoke BBQ. 4 locations all across town. You can find them online at rollingSmokeBBQ.com. But they're in Aurora, they're in Centennial, they're in Golden, and they're also in Wheat Ridge. You can find them at any of those. And online, you're going to find that catering menu where you can lock and load with whatever it is you're looking for. You want the brisket, the burnt ends, you want that. You want the hot links, you want the pulled pork, you want some ribs, you want the great smoked wings. Whatever it is that you are looking for, you're going to find it. And as I said, you're going to find it with that catering menu that they have online on their website at rollingSmokeBBQ.com. Stop in, whether you want want to dine in, or like I said, if you want to cater because you're going to have some people over to the house, or you're starting to look ahead to some of these cooler weekend weather dates that you want to be able to camp out inside, watch the game. Doesn't do any good to watch the game when you're stuck in the kitchen. Let Rolling Smoke Barbecue take care of everything for you. RollingSmokeBBQ.com. And when you stop in there, or when you call them, tell them that Nate and Sean, Mile High Sports, sent you.
Absolutely. We'll have an opportunity to talk more about this game as we go along, but the Colorado Buffaloes have a big game as well. It will be their Big 12 Conference debut game, obviously, or be joined it, depending on the way you want to take a look at it. And they will host the Baylor Bears tomorrow night in a game that might get a little bit moist. Looks like there could even be some weather in the forecast. Joining us to talk about it, the host of the SCO Show, our friend Chase Howell. Chase, thanks so much for the time.
Thanks for having me on. I'm excited.
This is an interesting game to me, Chase, because if you look at what we have learned in the early going, the Buffs ended up beating North Dakota State, a top-tier FCS team, but they had some trouble. They got boat raced by their old rival Nebraska Cornhuskers, and then they steamrolled their sometimes rival CSU Rams up in Fort Collins. But I don't know that we learned that much about them in those 3 games, because it's not really a shock that they've won the 2 of the 3 they were expected to. The problem is with Baylor, and given who they've played, I don't know if we know that much about them either.
That's exactly right. And we don't even know who Baylor's going to throw out there at quarterback right now. Very up and down start for them as well. And with Colorado, I think there were a couple positive signs you can take away from that Colorado State game. But like you said, they just looked like the better team throughout that entire game. And it made a lot of people think, how good is Colorado State really? So we don't know much about this team. I do like the idea that they may have started to create an identity on defense. And I think if they can hang their hat on the defensive side of the ball, then things could be looking up for the Buffaloes.
Do you think that when you're talking about the defensive identity, and I know they were able to get after Fowler Nicolosi, but I guess as Shedeur Sanders himself brought up the week before, how many times did Raiola get touched, as he pointed out? The situation there for the Broncos going after the quarterback, yeah, it worked against the Rams, but is that really an identity yet? Because they didn't have any luck getting to Raiola against Nebraska. And quite frankly, they didn't have much luck getting to either of the 2 quarterbacks that both played and cycled in and out for North Dakota State. Do you think they really turned a corner, or do you think this might have just been the fact that Colorado State might not have the athletes to hang with the Buffs?
I think it's a little bit of both. I think they're starting to find a little better personnel on the defensive side of the ball. Nakai Hill-Green, the linebacker, has really impressed over the last 2 games, and he wasn't even a starter heading into the North Dakota State game. So they've been able to find a couple more players. They really like their pass rushers heading into the year, and I think those guys started to come alive. Deion Hayes, the Pitt transfer in particular. So if they can start to get some confidence on the defensive side of the ball, I think we're going to see this defense actually be pretty stout. Obviously, new defensive coordinator, a lot of new players on that side. So you can look at it with a lot of optimism and think that this defense might actually be pretty good.
It's important to note the new defensive coordinator, Robert Livingston, has never been that before either. The defensive backs coach for Cincinnati Bengals, taking the promotion to be the DC up in Boulder. Let's look on the offensive side of the ball, where for only the second time in Deion Sanders' run as the Buffs head coach, they cleared more than 100 rushing yards. That in and of itself is not impressive, but I thought it was impressive that they got it done primarily with Micah Welch. Dallin Hayden was out, of course, the Ohio State transfer not available in that game. So you were really down to, at least on the depth chart, your 3rd string back, although I think Offerdahl may be at the top of that depth chart for, let's just say, narrative reasons more than football reasons. But did you see something in the game for the Buffs that made you believe that, one, the running game was legitimately improving, or is this another one of the factors in which they were just a better team? They had a lead for a lot of the game, and they were able to sneak over that century mark.
You're right. Dallin Hayden has been the most impressive back through these first 3 games, and they didn't even have him against Colorado State. I just think they were able to stay a little bit more patient. They were obviously down 3-0 after the first quarter, and they stayed patient with the run game. They started to get it going in the second quarter, and I think a lot of times with this team, when they weren't able to run the ball early in the game, they just went completely away from it. So I was impressed with their ability to stay patient, and we'll see if it's a legitimate run game, but the idea that they're at least trying, I think, is a reason to be optimistic, because we really didn't see that last season.
Yeah, Chase, how much are they really trying? And I ask this only because in their 2 wins. we saw an opportunity for the Buffs to basically run out the clock, all but run out the clock. And every coach by and large would tell you in general, when you have a lead and time to your advantage and the ball, you run the clock down. They didn't do it, instead choosing to pass and giving North Dakota State a puncher's chance to come back. They did not have much of a threat in this game, obviously, of anyone to come back. But again, instead of just sort of putting the Rams out of their mercy and running the ball and getting out of there, they subjected Shedeur Sanders to more opportunities to take hits, to rack up a bunch of stats that were totally unnecessary. Whether Shedeur Sanders is quote unquote stat padding or not is irrelevant. The point is, if you keep doing this, one, it looks like you're stat padding. And two, why are you risking Shedeur Sanders' health? Who is making these calls? Is it Deion Sanders? Is it Pat Shurmur? Or is Shedeur dialing up his own number?
I think it's hard to tell right now, but I was listening to the broadcast, the radio broadcast for that fourth quarter, and Kerry Barnett was just freaking out. He's like, why is Shedeur still in this game? Travis Hunter was still in the game late in that fourth quarter as well, and they kept throwing the football. I think you'd have to point to Deion Sanders. I think he really took what happened personal, and I guess you just live with that type of thing with Coach Prime, and that's what we've been getting from him.
Here's the thing, and I guess I'll push back. I don't think it's Coach Prime, because we know that he's not calling the plays on game day, right? We know he doesn't do that. Certainly, he's talking about the direction over the course of the week. We know he's talking about halftime adjustments, and of course, he's on the headset with his coordinators. But seeing as the exact same thing happened against North Dakota State, where there's certainly no bad blood there whatsoever, and all the more reason to make sure you don't find a way to blow that game, I get the impression that this is Shedeur Sanders making these calls, and Pat Shurmur, as the offensive coordinator, isn't really doing anything to stop him. If I'm right, how much of that is a problem going forward?
I definitely think he had too much power in that North Dakota State game. It seemed a lot like a different situation against North Dakota State, where Shedeur was actually making checks when they were trying to run the football late there. I do think that they wanted to throw the football late against Colorado State. I think they took it very personal and wanted to run up the score. But yeah, I mean, I think that's been the issue. I think it was an issue with Sean Lewis. I don't think Shedeur trusted Sean Lewis at all, and basically wanted to call his own offense late in those games. And what we heard a lot in the offseason was that Shedeur and Pat Shurmur have a really good relationship. They really trust each other. But if you're letting a college quarterback guide your entire offense, I definitely think that's an issue.
Yeah, and my worry is that's what's happening, because as you pointed out, yes, Shedeur Sanders and Sean Lewis did not end up hitting it off, as it turns out, and basically, Shedeur wanted to call his own number more often. He talked about it after the Nebraska game and the idea of going forward on 4th and 1, saying that he believed in the 2 games in which they had tried to go for 4th down and couldn't get it on the ground. He pointed out that I'd rather throw our best punch, and I throw our best punch, and I'm paraphrasing only slightly. But the idea that Lewis gets replaced because he's not doing what Shedeur Sanders wants and is comfortable with. Now you bring a guy in who is at least on the same page as Shedeur Sanders. That kind of indicates that Shedeur audibles or calls what he wants, and Shurmur just kind of says, okay. And if he's there to carry the clipboard for the quarterback, that's going to get exposed. Sanders is having a good year, of course, 70% completion, 999 passing yards on the year, 9 touchdowns in the 3 games, 2 interceptions, and one of those extraordinarily fluky. Of course, that one's offset by the other one he threw, which was extraordinarily awful. So I guess they even out. But 7 sacks again in 2 games, the same problem starting to pile up again for Sanders against a Baylor team that is going to be vastly better, even though we're not sure about what kind of team they are, than the 2 teams the Buffs have already beaten. How much of a concern is that?
Shedeur is having a good year, but this is very similar to what happened last year. Does he know how to play winning football? I think is more of the question.
And when to cut and run, right?
Right. And I think you're going to have to play winning football against a team like Baylor. I don't see this being a high-scoring shootout type of game at all. I think it's going to be a grind them out, especially in the rain. But I think you're looking at 2 teams where they might both be better on the defensive side of the ball. Baylor definitely is better on the defensive side of the ball. And I think in this matchup, Colorado defensively has the edge against Baylor. So this is going to be a grind them out game. And I think Colorado really has to stay patient. They got to stay patient with the run game. You might have to see a few more punts than usual. And I don't know if Shedeur is able to do that. I don't know if he can win ugly. I don't know how many times he proved that last year. And I don't know how many times he's proved that in his college career. But I think we're going to get that type of game against Baylor, and we're going to see if he can do it.
Yeah, game time weather now expected to be 60 degrees with potential rain and thunderstorms. So you could get a good old fashioned type of football game in which the ground game may be the deciding factor, and that's why I think it could be pretty fascinating to see what the Buffs do. It sounds very silly to say, I guess, but you're talking about the fourth consecutive nationally televised prime time game. There's no question that the enthusiasm and the excitement about the Buffs still very much exists. But let's think about what happens and how different this season will be looked at, let's say about 72 hours from now, if the Buffaloes win and go to 3-1 or lose and go to 2-2. It may be early, but this is an incredibly important game.
It is vastly important. I think it's one of the easier games on the conference schedule. I don't think you're going to get a home game against a mediocre type of Baylor team, a team that's probably going to be end up somewhere in the middle of the Big 12. A lot of their home games are against really good Big 12 teams, Oklahoma State, Kansas State, just to name a couple. So this is going to be your easier game on the schedule. And if they don't get this one done, then I don't think we're looking at 6 wins. I don't think we're looking at Peggy getting to a bowl game, because this is one of their easier games on the schedule.
Yeah, if the objective is to get to 6, this is one of the ones I think you absolutely have to have. When asked about the potential weather, Deion Sanders said that we're not going to take time out of practice to do a drill based on something that may not happen. That makes sense. But when we go back to the injuries there to Hayden, and the idea that I want to go back to the point you made with Shedeur Sanders, pardon me, that do we know if he can play winning football in a tight game? There haven't been a lot of games in which the Buffs had won close games in which Shedeur had not just been throwing the ball all over the field. Can this team play complementary football? Have you gotten the indication that they can? What have you seen specifically on the offensive line that indicates that that's a possibility?
I think we saw a couple bright spots. I think the big thing with this offense is they started to run a lot more pistol formation. That actually got their run game going. Shedeur just seems like a guy that loves to be in shotgun. We talked about a lot of those 4th and 1s where he ends up in shotgun with the running back right next to him, and they try to run it up the middle. I think they might have found something with the pistol formation and being able to run the football. And obviously, Dallin Hayden can help that as well. Another thing we saw against Colorado State a lot is running to the left side. They were utilizing Jordan Seaton, and Tyler Brown was actually playing left guard against Colorado State, and they had a lot of success running to the left side. So they might have found something. They obviously moved the offensive line around quite a bit for the Colorado State game as well. Tyler Brown slid into left guard. They had a new starter at right tackle, and obviously had a little bit more success. Of course, that was against a team like Colorado State, but there were a couple positives that you can take from that.
Well, we're not going to get out of a Buff segment without talking about the best player in college football, and that is Travis Hunter. And, whether he wins the Heisman or not is irrelevant. Nobody is doing what Travis Hunter is doing on the collegiate level. Big 12 Defensive Player of the Week, 5 tackles, the pass breakup, and the interception against the Rams. But in Hunter's case, when you continue to see this guy, I marvel. He is the best collegiate athlete I have ever been able to, I can say, watch in person. And is there a concern that he could wear down? It doesn't seem like it at this stage, and he's obviously a young guy. But the other problem is, if you are concerned about it, where do you take him off of, the offense or the defense?
Ooh, that's a good question. I would think it's probably on the offensive side of the ball. One of the main reasons being just the amount of wide receiver weapons that they have. But
despite the fact that he's dominating, he has more than double the catches of anybody else on the team, and leads the team in touchdowns 5-3 over LeJontay Wester, who got a pair, of course, last week.
Yeah, I really don't see them taking him out. I think he's going to play 120 snaps again. I think he's going to play 120 snaps every time he's healthy. But if they were, they'd probably take him out on the offensive side of the ball. I think he's been taking a few shots there as well. Maybe a few less screen plays might be nice as well, because he just seems to be getting hit a lot more. But he's Travis Hunter. He's a completely different human than I think we've ever seen before. So I have faith that he can stay healthy. He, without a cheap shot last season, he probably would have stayed healthy. This is as healthy as he's been in his college career so far. So he's on the right track, and if he keeps this up, I think we could be talking about Colorado sending a guy to New York.
Well, if you're looking to watch this game and you're trying to figure out a place to watch it with your fellow Buffs fans, there is no better place than number 38 because in part we have our watch party there every Buffs game, home and away. Of course, extension of the SCO show right there, pre and post game, before and after every Buffaloes game, home and away, over at number 38 down in Rhino. You can check them out at nmbr38.com. And while you're there, by the way, you can actually also reserve a table. And I'm going to say reserve a table. It's not the normal like reservations where let's get a table for X. You can pick out the table. They have the map. You pick out what you want because there are places with incredible views, both inside and out. They have the Jumbotron out on the outside there, on that outside area. It's amazing viewing right there. And on the inside, of course, delicious food, tremendous beers, tremendous spirits, cocktails, all of it with a Colorado flavor, all Colorado. Number 38, of course, refers to the entry into the Union from the state of Colorado, the 38th state of the United States. And that's where number 38 draws all of its inspiration from. So perfect place to go watch some Colorado football. Make sure you check it out tomorrow. The watch party beginning before the game at number 38 in Rhino. NMBR38.com is the website. Chase Howell is the host of the SCO show. Always good to talk to you, Chase. Thanks so much for all the insight.
Absolutely. I'm at Avs training camp right now, so sorry about some people running behind me. I tried to get you a view of the rink, but I got to go cover the Avs as well for my life.
Nothing wrong with that. Of course, we'll be getting more into that as the weeks go along as well. So enjoy the time on ice, and we'll catch the football this weekend. Thanks a lot.
Awesome. Thank you, Sean.
All right. An opportunity there to talk to Chase Howell, and then we will just move directly into, we talked about it today. We're going to talk about high school football, college football, pro football. If it happens in Colorado and it's got an oblong ball in it, we're going to talk about it. Joining us now is our friend Troy Renck from the Denver Post and the host of the Broncos podcast with Troy Renck. How are you doing today, Troy?
Fantastic, Sean. How are you?
I am doing all right. This is a fascinating game for me for the Broncos. I think they're in a big trouble here when we're talking about this game. But maybe at this point with an 0-2 start and maybe an 0-3 or maybe 0-4 start staring them in the face, the point isn't necessarily going to be wins and losses. It is not all about Bo Nix, but let's face it, it's a lot about Bo Nix.
Yeah, he has not played well. By any metric, he's shown competitiveness. It hasn't broken him. I've said this on my podcast, and we just dropped a new podcast today, my Broncos podcast. But if I had known they were going to drop him back 88 times in the first two games, I would have advocated for them to play Jarrett Stidham. Let him wear it for a month. But Bo needs to be better in the pocket. I wrote about that this week in the Denver Post. The nuances in the pocket, the ability to climb the pocket, move left and right, not drift back, that will allow his timing to improve and to allow him to make better decisions. And it's going to be hard this week. As you mentioned, Todd Bowles is going to blitz. There's going to be guys coming from all angles. But Tampa Bay, in that Tampa 2, the way they set it up, you should be able to run against them. That is the key. If you want to see Bo Nix start to develop some consistency, have some balance and run. I'm working on a story on the offensive line for the Denver Post for this weekend. And one of the remarkable stats is how predictable the Broncos have become offensively. According to Next Gen Stats, they've been under center 32 times. They've run the ball 25 of those times. It's the equivalent of a pitcher tipping his pitches. Like, we're under center, we're running, and the offensive line is not playing well at all. And frankly, they're playing terribly. But Bo Nix can play better. He needs to play better. But for him to take a step forward, Sean, it's got to be complementary. He's not going to just single-handedly play better without the offensive line improving and without them showing some semblance of a running game.
Yeah, Troy, there's some things to unpack there too, because I agree with you. The offensive line is not playing well. But then again, if you are tipping your pitches, and I agree with you completely, it's also a little harder to play offensive line when everyone knows exactly what you're about to do. Moreover, the Broncos' offensive running plays have been wildly bland, very vanilla. It's basically, dive left, dive right. There's not pre-snap movement. There's not a lot of cutback lanes. This has all just been very, very almost a high school style running game. Not a lot of diversion in it whatsoever. So I think that contributes to it. How do the Broncos get better at this in this game? When you look at Javonte Williams and Jaleel McLaughlin, neither of them been able to get untracked. It's been a disaster for Williams thus far. We saw Tyler Beatty get one carry for 16 yards, never got one again. I found Sean Payton's explanations of, we had all sorts of other plays ready for him, but it just didn't come up. I found that to be quite frankly, incredible in the literal sense, as in not credible, not believable. Will you see more Tyler Beatty? Will we see Blake Watson? Has there been enough of a momentum that the fact the Broncos have been banging their head against the wall that maybe if there's not a game-changing talent in the running back room, maybe just trying new guys and keeping them fresh is the answer?
Yeah, I mean, Sean Payton has hinted at that, saying you got to look at who's getting the carries, who's getting the reps. Javonte Williams, some people are defending it that it's solely the offensive line. I would disagree with that for a couple of reasons. One, when you go back and watch the film, and I have over the last 2 games, he's missing cutbacks. His vision is not, he's not seeing stuff that's opening on the backside. Sometimes he doesn't stick with the play called and he bounces out too early. Sometimes, again, he's just not putting his foot in the ground and going downhill. And he doesn't break tackles anymore. That's the issue. It used to be if he didn't read it correctly, it was boom, pow, bang. He's running somebody over and it's 5 yards or 4.5 yards. He has averaged 3.1 yards a carry over his last 12 games. You can't just dismiss that as the offensive line, because the offensive line at times during that has blocked really well in the run game. So I think you have to scrutinize his role. I would give Beatty more action, clearly. And Jaleel McLaughlin, I'd still use him the same way. What I would do is just flip-flop the roles for Javonte Williams and Beatty. Let Beatty get the first crack at running the ball, and then let Javonte Williams be the third down back. Basically make Javonte Williams Samaje Perine, because he catches the ball out of the backfield. He's fine at that, and he picks up blitzes. So it's not like he doesn't have a use, but I can't keep running him. The thing about a team that blitzes, though, Sean, there's openings to run the ball, the slip screens, the draws, those quick hitters. Those can work against the team that's really coming upfield aggressively. You have to crease them a few times. And then all of a sudden they're like, okay, we can't be going up the field every play like this because we're giving up 20-yard chunk plays in the run game. And they're going to be there. The question is, can this offensive line recognize it? Because they've been a horrible job of recognizing when guys are coming down in the box and who has who. Like, you see guys chasing ghosts, double teaming the wrong guy. Like, there's been legitimately just missed assignments consistently for a group that's supposed to be the identity of the offense. So they have to play better. And Sean Payton, on his end, limit the personnel groups. We don't need the line changes. Find a few guys you trust those. Maybe on some third downs, you're moving it out. We don't need four guys, 5 guys coming in every play. Like, that's just ridiculous. There's just not enough upside to it, because it's allowing Nix to get the play too late. He gets to the line of scrimmage. All he's worried about doing is snapping the ball. He's not diagnosing the defense. It all has to be streamlined. Just keep it simple, stupid. Keep it simple. I think that's the way back. Now, not to win a game, but that's the way to get back on the improving, is let's simplify it and see what we do well, and let's do that.
And then the point that you're making there, I think, is pretty clear, is there's only one person responsible for and can simplify it, and that's head coach Sean Payton. The line changes, as you put it, also tend to be things that tip off the defense. Again, when personnel come in and certain roles are happening, then again, you tip off that defense. That's been another one of these issues. Let's focus on the red zone woes. The Broncos in their first 2 games have gotten to the red zone 7 times. That's not disastrous. They only have 1 touchdown in those 7 trips, though. That's 14.3%, the worst ratio in the NFL. Bo Nix, in particular, has been awful there. 4 for 10, 15 yards, and an interception, a passer rating of 8.3, but he's not being held by the run game either. In the red zone, they've attempted 12 rushes for, they've gotten 12 total yards, I should say, on the ground on 6 carries. So an average of 2.0 per. Nothing is working in the red zone. Is that something to do with the players underachieving, or again, is this part of the play calling?
Well, that's the problem with the Broncos. When people are like, they want an easy fix, it's not one thing. Like, sometimes it's the play calling. Sometimes Javonte Williams slips at Seattle when he had a clear touchdown. Sometimes it's Nix making a bad decision. Sometimes it's 2 guys running the same route in a busted route in the red zone. When you look up and they're both, 2 yards from each other, and clearly one of them ran the wrong route. Again, for me, for a team to be great in the red zone, you have playmakers that are open when they're covered. They break tackles. They do stuff that no one can do. The Broncos don't have that luxury. They don't have that. So the second thing is, you got to execute well. You got to play in front of the sticks, and you've got to be able to get closer on these first and second downs. Because typically in the red zone, without looking at it, Sean, you have the data in front of me. They're in and up with a lot of 3rd and longs, 3rd and 7s, 3rd and 6. Nowhere on the field is that great. It's terrible there because of the spacing. There's no room down there. So now you're facing an obvious passing situation. The field's bunched up, and you have a team that doesn't have, a bunch of playmakers with a rookie quarterback and a struggling offensive line. And you look like, gee, I wonder why they don't score touchdowns. But I will say this. The offensive line stuff for me is fixable because I've seen them do it. Faith is believing in something you've never seen, and like blind faith. We've seen this offensive line play well. Now, their best lineman this year in 2 games has been McGlinchey. Now he's out for a month. So Alex Pachevsky, he's got a huge, huge role this week because they're going to go at him. They're going to blitz him. They better help him with chips or he is going to get destroyed by this Todd Bowles defense. But I believe the offensive line will get better. They take it personally. They've said that. They know they've been awful. So if they get better and settle down and just play consistent, not great, consistent, I think some of this other stuff will fall into place because it just feels like everything, every yard feels hard, Sean. Like it just feels like, and you know this from your baseball background. I tell people all this time, when you don't pitch well in baseball, everything else is hard.
Yeah. If you can't locate, it doesn't matter. Everything else becomes incredibly difficult.
Well, because you're trailing. You're constantly trailing. You can't do your run game. We can't play aggressive because we're down 5-0 after 2 innings. And that just watching the Broncos, because offensively they can't run and they can do nothing well on first and second down. Everything feels hard for them. And as soon as that fixes itself, they should be functional offensively. Now, what does that mean? I don't know. But there's no way they can continue to be this bad. And if they are, then Lombardi's got to go. Move up Davis Webb. Sean Payton's got to contemplate whether he should call plays. Like everything is on the table. If 3 weeks from now we're looking at this same offense.
Yeah, and if it gets, the thinking it gets easier in the red zone, especially, it does not. The Buccaneers last year allowed touchdowns on 42.6%. If you're the reference there, and I think people don't really necessarily know instinctively, what a good ratio or not that is. That was third in the entire NFL last year. This year, I know it's a small sample size, but they're better. They're only allowing it on 40% of their drives. So this is a team that stiffens up when they get into the red zone. They may not have Vita Vea. That certainly makes things different. But for the Broncos, who are just looking for, as Troy put it, a functional offense, that's something that, maybe Vea being there won't make much of a difference. On the defensive side, when you look at the bad game that Pat Surtain had, and I don't want to put anything about it except guess what? He had a bad game. He's due to have a bad game. He's human. Every once in a while he has a lousy game. I don't think much of it. I don't think he's likely to have 2 back-to-back. But against a Pittsburgh Steelers team, which we knew had Pickens and virtually nobody as a wide receiver, not the case with Tampa. Not only is Baker Mayfield playing very, very well, but Chris Godwin, Mike Evans, and rookie Jalen McMillan already each have touchdowns on the year. They have a plethora of receiving options, including tight end Cade Otton and Rachaad White, depending on his availability and how healthy he is an outstanding receiver out of the backfield. They're going to need a lot more than Surtain to bounce back if they're going to stop Tampa Bay through the air.
Yeah, I mean, Surtain, it's just that basic fundamentals. You just got to play more with your feet than your hands. He got a little handsy, and he got called, and part of it was, I think he felt Pickens was pushing him first, and then you know how it is. It's always the second guy. And he got caught. And he got frustrated. We haven't seen that from Pat. I would be shocked if he doesn't play well. And I would assume he's going to run around with Mike Evans. Godwin's a tough matchup for Riley Moss because he's slippery. He's so good in space. I mean, Moss is going to have his hands full, and he's played pretty well. I mean, so far through 2 starts, I'd say he's been okay. Probably met expectations if I'm being fair to him. But you're right. Tampa has weapons, and Mayfield is playing out of his mind right now. Probably some of his best football of his career. Now, again, they got outgained by almost 250 yards. They're not a great offense. They were great on opening day against Washington, whose defense is terrible. So there's some turnovers there. That's the key here, and it's not on the defense. The defense has played well enough to win 2 games. But is this the game they stay in it on the road? Because I'm certainly not going to pick them to win. But can you stay in it because you get a couple takeaways? Baker will put the ball in harm's way, usually once or twice. That's just his nature to take chances. Can you get one of those on a short field that gets this team some momentum? And Baker will take chances and hold on to the ball, and you can get a sack. Is this the game Cooper gets a strip sack? I mean, these are the things that they have to do well. And it's just so sad because when I've covered great Broncos teams in the 90s and then 2014, 2015, they made so many plays. It was the collective. Every mistake, when people are like, Pat Surtain's terrible and this guy's terrible, every mistake is amplified because they have no margin for error. So every time we see one penalty or one mistake, it's like, oh my God, we're going to lose the game. Yeah, because you don't score points. You don't score points. So you give up a cheap touchdown. You're the Broncos and you're down 10-0. That feels like 30 right now. But I expect them to play well defensively. If it were me, I would take more chances defensively, because the only way they're going to win this game is either a special teams touchdown, pick six, interception inside the own 20. That's the only way they can win this game. But I do believe the defense is going to keep it close.
Yeah, Vance Joseph did explain earlier in the week, talking about Baker Mayfield, he's playing the best I've ever seen him play throwing the football, putting guys in great plays. He's escaping the pocket a lot right now and making guys miss. He scored on a quarterback draw last week. He's extending plays and can make every throw. But you're right, he can make mistakes. The defense is going to have to find a way to pick them up in this game. But in the end, this feels like a really tough game for the Broncos to win. I'm just sort of hoping they can stay in it and we see improvement week to week. But if they end up losing this game and they end up losing it close, but let's say they end up losing it in double digits and get blown out, what are we talking about this time on Monday?
Well, they're going to West Virginia, and I'll be heading that way. I mean, it's a weird week for them because the first time since I've covered the team in 15 years, they're staying on the East Coast. So after the game, they're heading to the Greenbrier, the resort where the Saints did their training camp during Sean Payton. Maybe he can rekindle some of that old magic. Maybe can find someone like Kamara, Jimmy Graham, or someone that's just hanging out there that's available. I mean, all kidding aside, you go on a trip like that, it's a chance to galvanize. Now, I hate to use Nate Hackett as a reference for anything, but one of the Broncos' best games that season in 2022 was in London. You take guys all over, you're all together. It's kind of this collegiate feel. All the answers are in our locker room. Nobody believes in us. Can that help galvanize it? Again, if you have a team with good chemistry and they insist they do and you like each other, when you go on those kind of road trips, typically it helps bond you together. Sometimes you can't overcome your own lack of talent. But that's if this team starts splintering, like right now, it's lack of execution, lack of talent, bad play calling. But if they start pointing fingers, that's when you see what could be a 5-12 season become 2-15. So what we'll be talking about Monday is, is West Virginia the magic elixir to getting this team back on track? And the fact that we even have to say that out loud to just tell you how badly the season has gone, if the words West Virginia are somehow the answer to this Broncos season.
Yeah, you even said collegiate, and then it went back into my head of Rick Neuheisel taking the team inner tubing. I'm like, do we have to get that far into it? Let's hope not, that it doesn't have to be that bad for the Broncos. Of course, he is Troy Renck. Troy, you have the recent podcast out. Tell us a little bit about what's on this week.
Yeah, I talk about the offensive line. I talked to Mark Schlereth, Ryan Harris, Tyler Columbus about kind of what are they seeing on the film, what's going wrong up front. I kind of reintroduced some of the stuff I wrote in my column this week about Bo Nix he has to get better in the pocket awareness. It's whether he's climbing, whether he's moving left or right, just understanding a little better in the pocket, because it's leading to bad mechanics, which is leading him to be inaccurate. That's the one thing we didn't expect from him. We expect him to be on time, on target. He's not been consistent with that. So we look at that. And then I do talk about that West Virginia sojourn. What can that do for this team? Can it help them? Because if you lose to the Bucs 0-3, and then you head to the Hills, maybe that's the last way to get this team together, Sean. But listen, we all knew it was going to be a tough season. I thought they were going to be 6-11. That seems like a long shot right now, but there are some of these issues that are fixable. It's not the entire key to this season for me is leaving knowing that Bo Nix can be your quarterback. If they leave and he's not, that's a problem.
Yeah, well, if he's not, maybe going 2-15 isn't the worst thing for you, because you'll need another one. So I guess, those are the things. I don't know if it's looking forward to something, but I guess that's the silver lining. Maybe it would be better if the Broncos just played well on Sunday. We'll find out, and we'll get a chance to talk to Troy more about that next week. Make sure you check out the latest Broncos podcast with Troy Renck and everything he's putting together over at the Denver Post. Thanks so much for the time, Troy. Have a great weekend. You too, Sean. Take care. Thanks for having me on. Thanks so much. Always good to talk to Troy Renck. Make sure you download that latest Broncos podcast with Troy Renck anywhere you get the podcast, or check it out up on YouTube. Mile High Sports is that as well. We'll be back talking about some of Nate's been in the lab over there for a couple minutes working on his best bets for the NFL Week 3. We'll get to him in just a moment.
BYB Bare Knuckle returns to Denver, Colorado, Saturday, September 21st for the long-awaited rematch of the 2023 Bare Knuckle Boxing Hall of Fame Fight of the Year in one of the greatest bare knuckle battles to ever take place in the Trigon. As former BYB lightweight champion, Mark the Shark Irwin looks to regain his title against the man who took it from him, Julio Tenori. Plus, BYB women's lightweight champion Patty Juarez looks to become BYB's first two-division women's champion when she faces Courtney Cameron for the BYB Super Lightweight title. Don't miss these great matchups and much more. Visit BYBExtreme.com for tickets and information.
To the program, Nate Lundy is back in the house because
you said I was in a lab.
They're in the lab, right? It's kind of like in a lab. Is it a lab? I don't know. I don't know where you go. I'm doing interviews and you just leave. I figured you have some sort of magical betting lab. Does it work? Is it a lab? What is it?
I don't know.
Pull back the curtain. What are we doing?
I made
here?
a lot of money last night on Shohei Ohtani. I'll tell you that.
Well, I didn't. Oh, you know what? And Nate, you're right. Before we dive into this, and I get it. It is.
I made a
Friday.
lot of money on Shohei.
We're going to talk about this, but Nate opened the door because that has to be the performance last night by Shohei Ohtani. 3 home runs, 6 for 6, 3 home runs, 2 steals,
human,
10 RBI, and we're talking about 10 RBI as a leadoff hitter. Get some of these numbers. First player with 3 home runs and 2 stolen bases in a game since at least 1900. I like the fact we have to say that because there's no verifiable stats before then. So at least 1900. So in other words, probably never happened. 3 home runs and 2 steals. The first player since RBIs became official in 1920 with 10 RBIs and 5 extra base hits in the game. The second player ever since at least 1901 with 6 hits in a game, 5 were extra bases. And then, of course, he ends up going for 50-50 in that game alone. Credit to the Marlins manager Stevenson, who was actually kind of caught on camera when people were looking and seeing if maybe they would walk Shohei at one of the at bats when they had second and third, the base open. He was basically caught on camera saying, "Bleep that." I respect him too much to let that stuff happen, and went ahead and pitched to him. Now, of course, the last home run was off of infielder Vidal Brujan, but understandable to bring in the infielder because at that point it was 14-3 in the 9th inning. But Nate, I have to think, given all the numbers that I just gave you, given the fact he was a leadoff hitter on top of that, that has to be the greatest offensive game in the history of baseball. And I don't say that lightly, going the fact that you've been, it virtually has to be 3 home runs, 2 steals, 10 ribbies as a leadoff hitter, 6 for 6, 5 extra base hits. I can't even conceive that anyone ever in all the great names in history of the baseball has ever had a better game than what we saw last night from Shohei Ohtani.
They made him in a lab, right? Like, that's the only explanation. He's not real. There's no way this dude's real.
This dude, the last time, we in that,
like,
same
the
stadium,
scene where Chris Evans comes out in Captain America and he's no longer the little skinny scrawny kid. Like, that's what I picture. Shohei just popping out of the machine like, all right, let's go play some baseball. You realize they're talking about the potential that he could be ready to pitch in the postseason, right? On top of everything this mofo's already doing, he might pitch in the postseason. Unreal.
I don't know. I see. If I were the Dodgers,
think it's spectacular.
I would never. I'm not letting him pitch. In fact, I'm not sure I'm ever letting him pitch again.
I don't know. You may not need to, but
you always have enough pitchers. Even though they've had some injuries, I get it. But
who knows? Anyway,
the other thing that's nice. Shohei, 866 major league games, no playoff appearances. The longest streak of any active player. And it will come to an end in a couple weeks. Yeah, absolutely. So, all right. So let's start talking about some bets for this evening, right? Because nobody, it's just like fantasy football. Nobody wants to talk about your team. So nobody cares that made some money on Shohei last night. They want to know what we're going to be able to do this evening. They want to know what's going to happen over the weekend. So I want to get started on a couple of things. And I want to start with college football for tonight. And there are 3 games on the schedule. They're actually really interesting games. Stanford is on the road. They're taking on Syracuse. A top 25 matchup will take place in Lincoln between Illinois and Nebraska.
And then in the evening, San Jose State will travel north, and they will go up to Pullman. They'll take on Washington State. Each of the home teams in this are heavily favored. So you'll see that I popped up the idea on the screen there for you to just take the 3 home favorites. If you do that over at DraftKings right now, it's a minus 104. Might as well just be even money. Basically, you're paying 4 cents. But and you look at this one, I think Nebraska will beat Illinois. I think that the Illini has some talent. I think Nebraska is a little bit more talented than they are. And I believe Nebraska being at home when this team is finally starting to show a little bit of life to its fans, I think Memorial Coliseum in Lincoln is going to be bumping. So you put that together. I think Syracuse is favored by 8.5. I think they win it by double figures. So all I'm doing in this particular parlay is taking them on the money line. And the same thing with Washington State. I think that defense may be optional in Pullman this evening. I think we may see a lot of points, but at the end of the day, I just think the Cougars are a better team. They're coming off that Apple Cup win, which I know meant a lot to them in Seattle last weekend over the Huskies. So put all that together, Nebraska on the money line, Syracuse on the money line, Washington State on the money line from a college football standpoint tonight, and you've got yourself at a minus 104. Now, for you Husker fans out there, let me drop this one on you. I do think that scoring is going to be at a premium in Lincoln. The standard line on the over-under is in the low 40s. So I'm taking this same game parlay style, and DraftKings this evening has a boost specifically for any bet you want to make on the Illinois-Nebraska game. And so what I've done is created a same game parlay here where I'm taking Illinois plus 14.5. All I need is the Illini to keep this within a couple of touchdowns, and I think they're capable of doing that because they do have a good defense. I think that they will cause some issues a little bit for Raiola. But I'm also going to take the total all the way up to 53.5, and I'm going to play the under. But because of the boost, this comes out at plus 107. That's insane. To be able to take a 2-touchdown spread, and I'm bouncing, I think, another 11 points on the total and playing the under. And because of the boost, I'm getting that in positive territory at a plus 107. Brad built something similar on our podcast this morning, the Fade 5, but he actually only did it at 10.5 and did it at 50.5 on the total. So I added another 4 points on the spread, 3 points on the total, and still kept it in positive territory. So this is going to be a great statement game if Nebraska wants to try to show college football and show the Big Ten that they are back. And this is a great opportunity for them to do it in prime time on a little Friday night football.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to touch Nebraska. That's just sort of a personal.
It's all right. I don't like to bet on the Ducks unless I'm betting against them, so I get it.
Yeah. Sort of a deeply held belief there. But those all make a lot of sense, and we have a lot of interesting games in week 3 of the NFL coming up.
Yes, we do
as well. And I'll give you one of mine right off the bat because I'm just looking at the basics. Right? Don't ask me why. Because I don't understand it. I don't know what people saw in the Pittsburgh Steelers beating a bad Denver Broncos team, but the Steelers are a 2.5-point favorite at home against the LA Chargers, who are, by the way, 2-0.
Mm-hmm.
I get the Chargers don't have a lot of big playmakers, but neither do the Steelers. The Chargers just are on the money line, a plus 124 to win. To me, that's one of the easiest bets of the week. And usually money line bets aren't, you have to basically, reach out a little bit. I don't see the Chargers losing this game. I don't even think the Chargers are going to have much trouble with the Steelers. And I'll easily take them on the money line. That's a bit of a no-brainer for me. The other one that I like going forward is the Houston Texans of the Minnesota Vikings. The Texans are 2-point underdogs for the Vikings at home. I look at that and going to go, 2-point favorites on the road. But I look at that and think 2-point favorites. I don't think there's a concern of that. I actually bring that up for the Texans to a minus 5.5. Okay. I feel very comfortable about that. Then I get them at a plus 158 at DraftKings.
All right. Based on that, let me throw a couple of curveballs at you. I'll put it up on the screen for you. These are my favorite upsets on Sunday. Not necessarily going to jump on all of these, but I do think that there's an opportunity here for each of these teams. And with everything that we have seen so far across the landscape of the NFL through the first 2 weeks, I think upsets are definitely in the cards, but these are my favorites. I actually think the Vikings could be good for an upset here, against Houston on the road. That's a big, home field for them. They get loud. So if you're looking for an upset pick, I actually don't mind the Vikings there. You can see I also, much like Sean, I like the Chargers on the road against Pittsburgh. The other two upsets that I could see happening in the NFL this weekend, and these are all road teams, so I understand that this is a bit of a risk. But I think the Bears have a really good opportunity against the Colts, and I also think Baltimore has a great shot against Dallas. on the road. So my 4 favorite upsets. So forget the spreads. I'm just talking about teams that I think could win straight up. And we've seen some wonky crap so far in the first 2 weeks of the NFL. Vikings, Bears, Chargers, Ravens. Those are my 4 that I think could win straight up. Forget the points. What I may wind up doing with these 4 teams is alt-lining the different spreads, maybe make it so that I take each one of these teams to where we're talking about, say, a +7.5, +8.5, something like that. But when you parlay them together, you're going to wind up in positive territory with those. So Sean talked about the Chargers. I disagree with him about Houston and the Vikings. I think the Vikings have a good shot at the upset there. And then I also, as I said, I like the Bears on the road against the Colts. I like the Ravens down in Dallas, because right now the Cowboys haven't shown me diddly squat. So I don't have anything that I can really believe in them. When it comes to player props on Sunday, we can talk about yardage totals. We can talk about all those kinds of things, but I happen to know for a fact that what you guys like are touchdowns. So here you go. My 5 favorite anytime touchdowns for this weekend. Let's talk about Rashid Shaheed of the New Orleans Saints. +225 feels out of whack for me for him taking on the Philadelphia Eagles. So I'm going to take him for the touchdown there. The best odds in the business sits at BetMGM at that +225. How about Jerome Ford at home against the New York Giants? +135. Best odds out there for you are at FanDuel. And then these next 3, 2 of them tie together, but the next 3, are all available over at Caesars. That is where you will find the best juice as of tape time here of the program. 2 Raiders for you. Vegas is at home against Carolina. And Antonio Pierce continues to sing the praises of Zamir White. So give me Zamir White for an anytime touchdown at +110. Let's talk about Brock Bowers as well. Again, I don't think this number should be this high. He may not score a touchdown, but I'm looking at value here, EV plus, if you want to play that type of game. I think this number should be closer to +220 for him. So there's an extra 60 cents happening at +280 for Brock Bowers to splash 6. And then if I like Baltimore on the road against Dallas, well, then give me Lamar Jackson to be able to call his own number. +190 for the signal caller for Baltimore to be able to splash 6. So again, if you don't have the luxury of watching us on YouTube or on Facebook or on Twitter, and you're just listening to the audio, to recap it real quick: Rashid Shaheed, Jerome Ford, Brock Bowers, Zamir White, and Lamar Jackson as of right now. And I'll have some more on the spreadsheet for you that I post up on Twitter. But those are my favorite 5 anytime touchdowns for this weekend.
Well, let's steer a little bit towards the Denver Broncos and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. We both believe that this is going to be a rather one-sided affair. The Broncos find themselves in not a particularly great spot. 6.5-point underdogs on the money line. If you believe they're going to win, it's a +230, which is a good payout, but there's a 6.5-point underdogs for a reason. But if you're looking for value in that game, what do you see at the moment?
I think some of the value there, I think Bo is actually going to go over on his passing totals. I think that, if you look at those totals when they opened earlier this week, let me sort of focus in a little bit here on the spotlight. His yardage prop opened this week at 182.5. It's already up to 186.5, and that doesn't seem like a lot, but a 4 yardage movement shows you where some money is coming in. What I would do personally is something that Brad and I put together off air today after the podcast was over. Brad and I just sometimes we build some parlays together that wind up on the spreadsheet. Sometimes it's just he and I shooting the breeze and we come up with something fun. So we put together a same game parlay for this Broncos contest where we took Bo's total for passing yards all the way down to 150. All the way down to 150. We then took Bo to have at least 15 yards rushing. He's not afraid to use his legs, and in fact, we could see some plays that are called specifically for him. So 15 yards of rushing, 150 yards passing. And then this is the leg where Brad leaned into something. I'm not 100% convinced of it, so I might choose a different leg when I ultimately do this. But Brad believes that we are going to see Javonte Williams catching the ball out of the backfield. He really likes Williams' receptions prop. But what we did in the parlay is we actually switched it up and just went to his yardage and took him for 10 or more. That's it. 10 or more receiving yards. So 10 or more for Javonte Williams and 150 through the air for Bo, 15 on the ground for Bo. And that came out to right around a plus 160, 165. That's a pretty damn nice payday. And again, I think Bo's got a good shot of getting up to 200 yards passing against this Bucs team on the road. Some of that has to do with game script. I think they're going to have to throw the ball late, as we've talked about. But you just put all of that together. That's a really nice payday.
Yeah, I like it. And if you just want to simplify and keep it for Bo Nix over at DraftKings, you have a situation where you have the passing and rushing yards combined for Bo Nix, and there's a little bit of a minus there if you want to take some of the juice. But the over-under for pass and rush yards combined, 209.5 at a minus 115. I agree with you. I think he gets over that. You don't get great numbers there, but considering you get the yardage for the run and the pass in there, I feel he's going to get over that in part because he just has to get over that. But if you do believe he's going to get over 200 yards, and just the passing over at DraftKings, over 200.5, so 201 passing yards alone, regardless of anything else, get you a plus 135. Yeah. Seems pretty good because you and I think they're going to be down in this game, and Bo Nix is going to have no choice but to pass.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, like I said, I think I'd rather have a little bit of a lower threshold, something that I know that I can hit and pair it up with something, but I don't think those are bad plays.
Yeah, so we'll talk more about these Broncos matchup in just a couple of moments, but we've talked about it. It's a Football Friday, and Nate, we're going to go ahead and take a quick look at the situation here with the Preps game. So want to remind you, by the way, that if you're looking for a home loan, whether you're looking to refinance or find your new home, you want to talk to our friends at SCL Mortgage. If you're self-employed, having trouble getting a home loan, you need to reach out to SCL because they understand what it means to be self-employed and can help you refinance your mortgage or buy a home with just the bank statement loan. No tax returns needed. Obviously, it's complicated when you're running the whole show and you're self-employed. So you want to find SCL at myspecialmortgage.com or call them at 303-790-2222. They've been serving Colorado successfully in this exact capacity for 23 years. You can catch the SCL Mortgage shows on Saturdays with Danilo Pirro and Larry Jagger to tell you more about it. But this is exactly what they do, and they've set this up for people who are self-employed, make it as easy as possible to refinance, buy a new home, whatever you have to do. Simplify it for you because you have to jump through an awful lot of hoops when you're self-employed. They want to help you get through them faster and easier. Find them again, myspecialmortgage.com. We'll go 303-790-2222, NMLS number 1200716. Have an opportunity to talk about sports. Always get a chance to do this every Friday with our friend Dan Mohrmann, the editor-in-chief of ColoradoPreps.com. Dan, thanks so much. Look at this. Look how ready it looks like here on the screen. We got it's Dan Mohrmann show right here. It's you. It's all about you.
I mean, look at our guy, Danny Bailey, just coming in with the graphics.
Look at that.
You want to talk about the underrated MVP of our whole operation? And my vote would go to Danny Bailey.
Oh yeah. There's no question about it. I have a knob. I have literally a knob. That's all I have over here. And about 50% of the time I hit the wrong one. So yeah, it's all about Danny Bailey. But we have some interesting matchups in, of course, the Preps. The business is getting a little serious now for a lot of these schools. And you get some of the earlier Thursday night games. Last night, Castleview ends up coming back against Douglas County, gets a big win there in that battle for the rock down in Castle Rock. Ends up for a big view for the SaberCats. But now coming into this weekend, you get some really exciting games. Let's start with one of the ones in the 4A division, Pomona and Dakota Ridge. Dakota Ridge now the number 5 team in the region. So when you look at this matchup, this is one of the ones you picked out to highlight. What about it is so intriguing?
Well, so Pomona had kind of fallen off the map a little bit. They've been playing in Class 5A for years. Their enrollment actually puts them as a 3A school, and that's where they fell this year. And since they're kind of playing now where they belong, the Panthers have actually just put together solid performance after solid performance. They're 2-1. Their one loss was to a Pueblo West team that a lot of people have regarded as a top 4 team in 4A. So I think it was just a 4-point loss that the Cyclones got them. But this Pomona team is looking really good in the 3A ranks. They just thumped Green Mountain last week, another Jeffco rivalry game. So what I like about this is we're really going to see what they're made of. Dakota Ridge, they have the ability to go through the air if they need to, but they're also very much a running game. So I like this game because, one, if it's a 4 p.m. kick, which means a lot of people are going to be able to make a 7 o'clock dinner just by virtue of everyone running the ball. But it's also going to tell us what Pomona really is in regard to district rivalry. There's probably some added tension there. And can they beat now a top level 4A team? Because Dakota Ridge is coming off a very close win to another team we're going to look at here in a minute in Mesa Ridge. So these are two very good football teams, and I really like what's in store over at the NAC tonight.
Well, let's stick with 4A, and you have a matchup of two of the top 10 schools. Heritage visits Mesa Ridge. That's 8 versus 7. So obviously when you're talking about shaking out those top 10 rankings, this one's important.
Yeah, and then this is a game that Mesa Ridge probably has to win just from the standpoint of coming off that loss that I just mentioned to Dakota Ridge. Quarterback Bryce Reel is he's probably one of the best competitors in all of high school athletics right now. He helped Mesa Ridge. They're fresh off 2 consecutive 5A boys basketball titles. He's been QB1 since late in his freshman year. I was actually at the game where he got inserted in as the quarterback. It was probably about midway through. They were getting beat up pretty good, and this kid just gave them a spark, and he's never relinquished that job. So I'm curious to see what he does here. Heritage is a team that has no qualms about throwing the ball around. Jamison Cease he's got over 600 passing yards this season, and Heritage has looked really good too. So this is a game, because it's down in the Fountain area, just south of Colorado Springs. You never know. I might jump in my car, make my way on I-25, and end up down at C.A. Foster Stadium at Whitefield High School to check this one out.
In between trips up and down the incline, I'm sure. Where are you at now on your on your quest to 100?
And I was thinking about this, Sean. I wasn't going to bring it up. Today was 91 and 92.
Okay.
One of the reasons that I
want 91 more than me ever lifetime.
Just probably. So you know what I thought about today?
I remember doing it once. Yeah, definitely is.
I was thinking about it today. I've got 2 speeds on the incline. My first trip is Ford Mustang, because I'm all about speed on the first trip. Second one is more of an F-150. I'm putting it in 4-wheel drive. It's not as fast, but we're going to get up there slow and steady. The one thing I forgot to mention about Pomona, I'm not saying this is the reason that they're having a great year, but I did bump into the Pomona football team right before official practice started at the beginning of the season. I'm not saying it's the reason they're 2-1, but I'm not saying it's not the reason they're 2-1.
Okay. Well, and remember, by the way, I was talking to Dan Mohrmann, that you can check out coloradopreps.com, and you can download the free Colorado Preps app driven by Ford. And on there, of course, there's the terrific scoreboard. You can check out all the scores in nearly real time. We cover more at coloradopreps.com than even the folks at Chassa do. So nobody covers it like coloradopreps.com and all of that with our partners at Ford. Thanks so much for making that possible, because it is not an easy thing to make sure you get all the way through all of these levels all over the state all the time. And before we'll let you go, let's talk a little bit about going down to 2A, where Kent Denver, ranked number 3rd, goes to Forge Christian in this week's action down there. There's a lot of in the 2A and 1A ranks this year. There is a lot of tight knit groups.
Yeah, we talked about it a little bit last week with that Centauri Buena Vista matchup. That that the winner of that game was maybe going to be the bona fide number 4 team in 1A. Because your 1, 2, and 3 are going to be Ray, Lyman, and Forge Christian. I talked to Lyman coach Mike O'Dwyer. I told you the story last week, Sean, and he is just impressed with how Forge looks and how they play. So they're one to look at. They're not getting enough first place votes from coaches and media to jump up to that spot in our poll, but they are definitely a championship level threat. And you have a Kent Denver team who, it's taken him about a year or two after the retirement of Scott Yates, who at one point, he and Chris Brown from West Graham were going back and forth. But at one point, Scott was the all-time winningest coach in Colorado history. He left. Sun Devils took a little bit of a step back, but they are playing so well right now. And they're, again, you probably have 3 teams at the top of 2A in terms of TCA, Delta, and Kent Denver. And so this game is really, Kent Denver can win, but the perception of each team may not change just because of how close it could be. I showed you a website last week when Nate was complaining that he couldn't bet on high school sports, and we went through a little bit of a projection matchup with score. So I was looking at this Forge Kent game, and calpreps.com is the website. They have Forge as a 22-19 winner. And so, in terms of hype, in terms of expectation, this could be every bit as close as I'm making it out to be. I could also be wrong, but I guess you're just going to have to take a peek at the scoreboard later tonight and find out.
It's the way to do it. Make sure you check out the Colorado Preps app, driven by Ford, and you can check out the scoreboard, watch them as they happen. A terrific slate of games, as always, is prep sports one of the most fun and underrated things. I'm telling you, it's been on the Friday nights forever, but if you haven't gone out and caught a high school game, just go catch one. The energy and enthusiasm out there with the kids, and more as prep sports bubbles up in Colorado, it's becoming more and more of a scene. So make sure you check it out. Dan Mohrmann is the guy that puts all of it together.
And real quick, Adrian Wojnarowski, who just retired from ESPN to take a job with his college alma mater as their general manager for NIL. And he had a write-up, and he said the toughest job he ever had was working high school football.
Yeah, well, pat yourself on the shoulder a little bit there on a Friday.
I'm just saying, if a guy like Woj is saying it, there's some validity to it, and I wouldn't give it up for anything.
Is true, and maybe Dan's phone doesn't light up as often, or maybe it does, but no, I guarantee you there's nobody in media in Colorado that puts more miles on his car than Dan Mohrmann, who drives literally all over the state. You're up last weekend to catch a Summit High School up in Breck, and you'll be moving all over this weekend as well. So enjoy the games tonight, and we'll catch you next week. Thanks so much, Dan.
Sounds good. Thanks, Sean.
All right, thanks, Dan Mohrmann, the editor-in-chief of ColoradoPreps.com. Make sure you download that Colorado Preps app, driven by Ford, and check out all the latest. The scoreboard will keep you up to date in real time as all the games go along this weekend. We'll take a look at the Broncos and the Bucs and let you know what we think will happen next.
BYB Bare Knuckle returns to Denver, Colorado, Saturday, September 21st, for the long-awaited rematch of the 2023 Bare Knuckle Boxing Hall of Fame Fight of the Year, in one of the greatest bare-knuckle battles to ever take place in the Trigon. As former BYB lightweight champion, Mark the Shark Irwin looks to regain his title against the man who took it from him, Julio Tenori. Plus, BYB women's lightweight champion, Patty Juarez, looks to become BYB's first two-division women's champion when she faces Courtney Cameron for the BYB Super Lightweight title. Don't miss these great matchups and much more. Visit BYBExtreme.com for tickets and information.
All right, it is Football Friday. We've gone over the preps. We've gone over college. We've gone a little bit over the Broncos. Now we take a look at the Broncos and the Bucs. Nate, this is a weird game to talk about because, look, let's face it. Neither you and I have thought the Broncos are going to even get to 6 wins. We think they're going to be a 5-win team. Yeah. And quite frankly, maybe that's even dropping.
The odds makers have lowered it at this point to 4.5.
Right. Now that you have lost to both Seattle and Pittsburgh, I think that's changed. And
the odds makers thought they were going to get one of those.
Yeah, thought they were going to get one. And I thought they were going to get one of them too. They did not. Now they will take on the Buccaneers. Baker Mayfield was playing very, very well. We had a chance to talk with Troy Renck. Renck did point out that Mayfield still, as this is want, sometimes makes mistakes, puts the ball in danger. And maybe that's one of the opportunities for the Broncos. But here's the other one. The Broncos offense, as we know, it's not mediocre. It's not bad. It's abysmal. 29th in the league in yards per game, 263 yards per game. But the Bucs allow 381 in their first two. That's 28th in the league defensively. So if the Broncos can get better, if they can be more efficient, at least it indicates that the Buccaneers do give up the yards and maybe give you a puncher's chance.
Yeah, I think they give up the yards. I think the thing that I would say in terms of Baker occasionally still putting the ball into dangerous situations is that I believe between Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, and Cade Otton, he has talented receivers that can bail him out. I think he has some guys that can go and get the ball. I mean, if you're looking for, some opportunities to combine the Broncos game with some betting things, I mean, I think you need to expect that Chris Godwin and Mike Evans are both going to wind up being very good in this game. So, and it's because they can make it happen. Remember, Mike Evans is the first guy ever to have 1,000 yards in all 10 of his first 10 seasons.
Yikes.
I mean,
that's with a lot of different quarterbacks.
And that's insane, right? I mean, granted, he's benefited by the fact that Tom Brady was there for a couple of years, but Tom Brady wasn't there for all 10.
He had to do it with Jameis Winston.
Yeah, I mean, he's just a guy that just goes out there and gets it done. He's just an absolute workhorse of a wide receiver. I think Chris Godwin is very talented, and I think that they have not yet found, as TJ Reeves told us yesterday, they have not quite found the rhythm yet with Cade Otton.
Yeah,
but I think that when they do, they're going to be in a situation where now they have a big man, a plus size target, as Brad would say, to be able to get the ball to. So I think there's a lot of offensive weapons there. So I think that Troy's right that Baker Mayfield still, he winds up with a little bit of that Brett Favre cowboy in him sometimes. But I also believe, frankly, somewhat similar to what Brett Favre had there for a while, he has some receivers that bail him out, right?
Certainly. I think there's a lot of that. And I think they have a lot of good receivers for the tight end spot. At least for the Broncos, it is worth noting that they have not had, at least in the first 2 games, the major issues with the tight end that you expect. Noah Fant only had 11 yards receiving for the Seahawks. Freiermuth had the most receptions with 4, but he only had 39 yards and didn't even average 10 per catch. So perhaps the Broncos are at least doing a little bit better when it comes to guarding the tight end, and maybe that will keep Otton down. But the concern for me, Mike Evans is Mike Evans, and Pat Surtain's going to get some, and Mike Evans is going to get some. I mean, that's just it is. These 2 guys are very good. It's going to be a great battle to watch. If you like watching wide receivers and cornerbacks go at it, that will be a fun one to watch all day long, because that's 2 of the best doing their thing. But it is Godwin and Riley Moss, or Jalen McMillan and Jaquan McMillan for the Broncos, that also make me wonder, because you're talking about the receiving core. Otton has not gotten going, but we know he's good. We know he's productive. You have Godwin on the other side, as Troy Renck called him, slippery, a guy that may be hard for Riley Moss to stick with. He's already got 15 catches in 2 games. And so Godwin concerns me. And then, of course, the rookie McMillan, you would have another speed guy who can make things happen for the Broncos. If they can't get some pressure on Mayfield, it is probably too much to ask the Broncos defensive backs to hang with all of those receivers, and that's going to be a problem too. So getting after Baker Mayfield is going to be a big part of this. Fortunately, even though Rachaad White is a great target for dump off, he's a very good pass catcher. The Bucs have not really run the ball all that well themselves either. In fact, the best per carry rate goes to Mayfield. It was 55 yards, second on the team in yards behind Bucky Irving. Irving will play a role in this, but even Irving, who is averaging 5.3 per carry, he's only had 16 carries. So this isn't a team that runs the ball all that well when you're talking about the running backs, much like the Broncos. The quarterback is gaining a lot of their yards. That's one thing when it's Lamar Jackson or Josh Allen, maybe. It's another when it's Bo Nix and Baker Mayfield. So if Mayfield is near the top of the rushing charts for the Bucs, at least you don't have to be as frightened as the run. And until and unless they're beating you on the ground, you'll have an opportunity to at least give those defensive backs a little bit of help, because if they can't get to Mayfield or pressure Mayfield, it will be a really, really long day for the Broncos. There's just too many targets. That's 5 guys, 5 that we know are producers out of there in the receiving game. The Broncos can't cover all of them.
No, they can't. And the other thing that you're going to see Tampa try to do is longer drives to wear out that defense
and then hit them over the top.
That is what worked for Seattle in the game in week 1. And I think that, Todd Bowles and company know that can work for them again. That entire coaching staff knows that they can make that happen. So look, I think that this is going to be relatively low scoring, maybe not as ugly as the Steelers game was.
Shouldn't be.
But it's kind of hard for things to be much more ugly than what the Steelers game was. So I think this is going to be a low scoring game. I stand by what I said. I think the Broncos are going to lose by double figures. And that might be something late that makes it happen that way. I mean, it might be a closer game until we get into the final 5-6 minutes of the fourth quarter. But I do think the Broncos are going to lose by double figures coming up on Sunday. If I've got to put a number on it, let me call it 23-13.
Okay, that sounds. A 10-point sounds right to me too. 20.
I'm making stuff.
23-13 would be.
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, guessing an exact score is difficult, but I'm with you. I think this is close to a double-digit game.
Break out some Dungeons and Dragons dice here. Just be like,
just go for it.
Sure, whatever that.
Whatever that is.
Spin the roulette wheel.
Yeah.
I mean, will the Broncos come up on 0-0? Maybe.
I would love to see the Broncos find a way to get 2 touchdowns in this game. I don't know if they can do it.
A touchdown.
Yeah, well, if they get to 13, presumably they're getting one, right? Unless you're doing
touchdown. How pathetic is that?
Are they getting 2 safeties again? 2 safeties and 3 field goals? Is that what you're calling?
No.
Okay.
They're not doing
so then, presuming they're going to get a touchdown, I think they will. Let's just get one and stay in the game. But I do think this is going to be tough. And if Denver doesn't get an early lead in this game, it could get very, very ugly. I do think it's going to be one-sided. I think the Buccaneers are going to win this. I think they'll win it rather handily. Doesn't mean you still can't get progress in the Broncos, because you can. But that's probably what we're looking at. We're not talking about a win. We're talking about 0-3. And then how do they take on the New York Jets and Aaron Rodgers and avoid 0-4? And that might not go very well either. But again, the idea isn't looking at wins and losses. It's progress for the team, progress for Bo Nix, progress for Sean Payton. Even more than Nix, to me, in many ways, is what I'm curious about. I obviously am concerned about Nix's progression, but I want to see if Sean Payton finally does anything different. He keeps saying he's going to do something different. I want to see him actually do it.
He's not going to. He's just going to frustrate us.
Spoiler alert. Look
just,
at that.
You know, just
way
I'm
to
just
send us into a Friday
I'm
night.
just going to be
They're
Debbie.
lose
I'm
by
going to be.
10.
Look,
Payton's not going to do anything different.
I'm going to be Debbie Downer until they prove me otherwise.
Hard to argue with the logic behind
Show
that,
me.
unfortunately.
Show me.
Yeah.
I'm going to go. You know what? I'll use very similar to what we talked about with Deion Sanders after the North Dakota State game and after the Nebraska game, when we said, quit talking about it and be about it. So I'm going to apply that same thing by driving south from Boulder to Dove Valley, and I'm going to apply the same thing to Sean Payton. Don't talk about it, be about it. Actually show it. And I believe that he is a smart football person. And I'd like to believe in his ability to get this team on track where it needs to be, and most importantly, his rookie quarterback. But he's got to show it. He can't just talk about it. He's got to show it.
Broncos and Bucs will kick it off at 11 a.m. Colorado time.
Gotta actually get out of bed on Sunday.
Do
This
you
is
though? I mean, you can just
stupid.
kind of lay in bed.
I don't have a television in my bedroom.
You can watch it on your phone or something.
If I had a television in my
Mannings once
bedroom,
said
I
you
would
could
never
get
sleep.
football on your phone. Oh, yeah, there you go. But
Yeah.
anyway, we'll be back at it for Monday. Thanks so much, Dan Mohrmann, breaking down all of the Preps action. You can catch Dan at ColoradoPreps.com. Download the free Colorado Preps app, driven by Ford as well, for all of the latest. You can get all those scores in near real time with you all the way across the state. Chase Howell, host of the SCO Show, joined us to break down the Buffaloes. And, of course, our friend Troy Renck from the Denver Post. Check out that latest podcast, the Broncos podcast with Troy Renck, with all of the Broncos former offensive linemen he talked about, because that's a story in this game as well. We'll talk more about it on Monday when all of the football gets played. We'll break it all down for you when we get back. Danny Bailey is the man that makes all of this work, as Dan put it, the MVP of Mile High Sports, the unsung MVP of Mile High Sports. Thanks to Danny for making all of this work. Thanks to you, however you choose to listen to the show. We appreciate it. Take care of yourselves. Be nice, be patient, because we want you back here on Monday. Enjoy the football. You know, be nice to your fellow friend. Just because the Broncos maybe are bad, find something else to be happy
I'm going to go
about.
get drunk.
That's an option as well. For Nate Lundy, I'm Sean Drotar. Happy Friday. This is Mile High Sports.